On today's episode, I'll be talking about the 2005 film Batman Begins.
If you're looking for a man with no plans or programs, and he always leaves a chance to hold hands for romance. Are you looking for the Luke with an old man, a cold hands? It's a creature of the night who heads for his spotlight. I'm here to welcome you to Brandon at Random Reviews. No method when I choose. It's Brandon at Random Reviews.
All right, everyone, welcome to Brandon at Random Reviews, covering one unsystematically chosen topic at a time. If you like listening to a guy recap and review movies in weekly episodes, then look no further. To keep up with the newest content, you can find Brandon at Random Reviews on most major video and audio platforms, as well as all popular social media sites. If you enjoy this, please like and subscribe, and maybe drop me a nice rating on your app of choice. It really helps me out a lot. Like I said, today's movie is Batman Begins, based on characters and stories originally created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger for DC Comics. This story in particular is largely inspired by the comic series Batman Year One by Frank Miller, released on June 15th, 2005, with a runtime of 140 minutes. This movie is rated PG-13 for glamorized depictions of people with untreated mental illnesses. Budget $150 million. Directed by Christopher Nolan, who also directed the movie Memento, which is his biggest first outing. He had a movie called Following before Memento that wasn't as big, but Memento was a lot more mainstream. It's about a guy who has short-term memory loss. Think Dory from Finding Nemo, or Finding Dory, if you will. He also directed a movie called Inception, which stars Leonardo DiCaprio and has a pretty stacked cast, and honestly, it's a really intense, cerebral movie like most of his movies are, and I just find it really enjoyable. It's a really good time. I've only watched it a couple of times, I think. I own it, but I've never watched it that many times. And he also directed the movie Interstellar with Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway, and a few other people are in that one. That one's a pretty good one. It was a very early role for Timothée Chalamet, I believe. For the writer, we have David S. Goyer, who wrote the original Blade with Wesley Snipes. And when I say original, I mean the original movie. It was based on a comic book series, and actually it was hugely successful. Very popular movie. Very cool, sleek movie. If you haven't seen it, I would definitely check it out. It was basically at the dawn of the increased popularity of comic book movies. It was like before X-Men, which was really the one that gets credited a lot because I think people forget about Blade. But honestly, Blade is so good. He also wrote Dark City, which is a lot of people compare that one to The Matrix, which it's similar in a lot of ways. I think that the movie is very good, but it did suffer by not having like a huge name in the lead role. It was Rufus Sewell, and he's just not a leading actor in a lot of things, so it's tough that he's like the leading man in that movie. And he also wrote Man of Steel, which is basically Batman Begins for Superman, whether you like it or not. And that was directed by Zack Snyder. I think that movie kind of suffered in that it was not directed by Christopher Nolan, but I don't think Christopher Nolan wanted to get into the business of directing a ton of superhero movies. Christopher Nolan was also a credited writer on this movie, and he wrote those three movies I already talked about with Memento and Inception and Interstellar. He generally has some part in writing the movies that he directs, and he's a very talented, intelligent individual. You can just kind of tell from his writing that it's very smartly done. For the composers, we have James Newton Howard, who did the music for the movie Blood Diamond, which is an underrated one for me. Like, I don't think a lot of people know about that movie or talk about it, but it's got Leonardo DiCaprio. It's about the diamond trade in Africa and basically it's basically like the Colombian cartel for diamonds. It's like the way the Colombian cartel is for drug trade and how violent and scary it can be is what the diamond exchange is in Africa. He also did the music for The Sixth Sense, which I covered earlier this season. Really great movie. Honestly, really great music too. I really like that one. And he also did the music for Green Lantern, which I believe I've talked about as being a really terrible, terrible movie with Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. And honestly, I just don't know what the fuck they were thinking when they made that movie, but they made it. I think the biggest problem is Green Lantern wasn't like a super popular superhero. I'm not saying he's not like a good superhero. I'm just saying in terms of superheroes, he was just not at the top of the list or even close for the ones that people wanted to see made into a movie. So that already had the deck stacked against them. So I didn't really get that. Also, co-composing this movie is Hans Zimmer, and he also did the music for Gladiator with Russell Crowe, one of the all-time great movies, honestly. Great performance from Crowe, and honestly, very memorable and intense and just really enjoyable. He did the music for the new Dune movies. I don't know if he's done all three of them. And the third one, I don't even think it's out yet. And the first and second one, I want to say he did both, but he definitely did the first one. And he also did the music for True Romance, which is one that I definitely intend to cover pretty fucking soon here. So, I mean, it is what it is. I'll talk about it more when it gets to it. For the cast, we have Christian Bale, who plays Bruce Wayne / Batman. Before this, he was in a movie called The Machinist, which is a really intense movie. I might have mentioned this before, and I'm just going to stop apologizing if I've talked about this stuff before because I've done enough episodes now that it's bound to have happened, and I'm sorry if I have to repeat myself every time. But this movie was, to me, like a modern Alfred Hitchcock movie. It's about a guy who is deathly skinny. Like, he looks like really emaciated. He looks unreasonably thin to an unhealthy level. And it's just a really dark movie, and you don't really know what's going on until the very end. And it's just crazy. Like, it's just a really wild movie. It's really enjoyable, though. I really like it. He was also in The Big Short, which is about the 2008 housing crisis in the United States when that bubble burst and all of these houses had really basically like their value fell greatly, and it was very difficult. And it's a really cool movie because it's funny, but it's also a true story, which is, for the record, one of my favorite kinds of movies when it's based on a true story, but they seem to make it like comedic to a degree. Like, I love I, Tonya, those kinds of movies. I would definitely check out The Big Short. He was also in Ford v Ferrari, which was the movie where it's not a comedy, but it's definitely based on a true story where the Ford Motor Company was trying to make a high-performance race car type vehicle to compete with Ferrari. And basically, it's the whole story of how that came to be and what the struggles were. It's got Matt Damon in it as well. Michael Caine plays Alfred Pennyworth, and if you're not familiar with this character, he is Bruce Wayne / Batman's longtime butler, and basically is just the guy, one of the few people out there who knows Bruce Wayne is Batman. Michael Caine was in the original Elfie, which I didn't really care for. I remember watching it, and I don't care for a lot of the early Michael Caine movies. I mean, he was in the original Italian Job that was remade into a movie that I really enjoyed, but the original was not an enjoyable movie to me. Like, I didn't think it was that exciting, and it could just be because of the era it was in, and I had too high of expectations for it. But he was also in like the original Get Carter, which I don't think the remake was considered that good because it had Sylvester Stallone in it, but I digress. He was also in a ton of Christopher Nolan movies. Like, this movie kicked off Christopher Nolan having like a huge stacked cast in all of his movies, and he got to be, over the years, such a sought after director that people who wanted to be in his movies would take a pay cut to be in his movies just so they could get a chance to work with him. And I think that's really cool. Liam Neeson plays Henry Ducard, and he was, of course, in the movie Taken after this movie. Taken is about a father who, like a divorced father whose daughter goes to Europe against his wishes and is kidnapped by traffickers, like people who traffic women and sell them into like sex slavery and stuff like that. And basically it's a really intense movie. There are some funny behind the scenes things about how Liam Neeson was getting older by the time he made that movie. And so if you see the way some of the stunt scenes would have played out if it weren't for like camera trickery and stuff, they would look ridiculous. Like it looks like an older man climbing up and down things, and it looks really slow. He was also in a movie called Rob Roy, I'm sorry, in the early 90s. I think that was early 90s. I'd have to look it up. But I guess, I mean, I could make that a thing where since I'm at my computer, I could just say, maybe you can hear me typing. I don't even know. Rob Roy is a 1995 film, according to Google. So that was a solid one. It's one of those like classic revenge movies where you've got like this piece of shit antagonist that is just has no redeeming qualities, but it's just a really solid movie. I haven't seen it in a really long time. Probably want to go back and revisit it at some point. And he was also in the very critically acclaimed Schindler's List, which was a Steven Spielberg movie about it was set during the Holocaust, and it's basically, I haven't seen it in so fucking long I could barely even form together what I'm trying to say it's about, but basically it's about a guy who like helps Jewish people being persecuted during the Holocaust. And it's a really well-made movie, and it's got a lot of cool stylized elements in it. It's one of the first movies to ever use like mostly black and white, but have some color and, use it for key elements to highlight them. Katie Holmes plays Rachel Dawes, and I have noted here that Katie Holmes is hot, and she was in a movie called Mad Money, and that movie came out around 2008, I want to say. And the only reason I mentioned Mad Money is because she starred in Mad Money instead of reprising her role as Rachel Dawes when they made The Dark Knight. Like, she basically said she had scheduling concerns and couldn't portray the character again. And basically it was just like the worst fucking possible decision because Mad Money was not a successful movie. It stars her and Queen Latifah and Diane Keaton, and it's like just kind of like a silly heist movie, and it's just kind of stupid. But it's just very funny to me that it's like, oh, you thought that was a better priority than playing a character in a Batman movie that you could have demanded probably a lot more money than they paid you on Mad Money, but whatever. She made a name for herself in the show Dawson's Creek with James Van Der Beek, and I think her character's name was Joey, and I only know that because of Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. Anyway, never saw a single episode of Dawson's Creek. I only know the theme song is very catchy, but I don't really know what the show is all about, like what the shtick is with it. And she was also in a movie called First Daughter when she was younger, and I believe that's just about the president's daughter. I don't really know what else happens in that movie and don't really care to find out. Gary Oldman plays Sergeant James Jim Gordon. Gary Oldman, I frequently forget that he is not American because he so frequently plays an American and does it so effectively that it's hard to remember that he actually has like an accent. I think he's British, but I can't remember. Let me see. Gary Oldman might be, he's Gary Oldman, Wikipedia. He's English. So yeah, he's English and he has an accent when he normally talks, but he was in The Fifth Element. He plays the bad guy in that movie. That was a really well-regarded sci-fi movie from the mid to late 90s with Bruce Willis and Mila Jovovich. Yes, her name is pronounced Jovovich, not Jovovich. He was also in Leon, or The Professional, whichever you prefer to call it. Sometimes it's stylized as Leon the Professional, but that was a movie with very young Natalie Portman in it, and it's a very interesting, exciting, cool movie. I really like it. Basically, Jean Reno is Leon in that movie, and he is the lead character, and he takes in Natalie Portman's character and basically trains her in how to be like an assassin, which is what he is. Oh, and Gary Oldman was also in the movie Air Force One with Harrison Ford. And honestly, Air Force One is Die Hard on a plane, but instead of John McClane, it's the president. And so he's on Air Force One. It gets hijacked by terrorists led by Gary Oldman's character. And it's a really good movie. I really enjoy it. It's very memorable. It's just that there were a handful of movies in the early to mid 90s that were just very unapologetic ripoffs of Die Hard, or at least the concept of Die Hard, which is that like an everyman type that doesn't look like a Schwarzenegger or a Stallone that was put in a situation where they had to go up against all of these bad guys without having as much physical prowess or ability as a lot of action heroes had to that point. Morgan Freeman plays Lucius Fox. He was, of course, in The Shawshank Redemption. He played Red. And honestly, The Shawshank Redemption is one of the all-time greatest movies ever made. And I say that unapologetically. It's a very great movie. It's very well made. And it was one of Morgan Freeman's earlier outings. I mean, his biggest outing was also, or I should say his biggest breakthrough role was Driving Miss Daisy, which I don't remember what year that was. I want to say it was late 80s, like 89 maybe even. And it has like Jessica Tandy, I think, as Miss Daisy, and he's her chauffeur. Not really like a terrific movie in my opinion, like not super great, not that impressed with it, but it was okay. And he also played God in Bruce Almighty. He is very well known for having a very distinctive, soothing voice. It's like lightly raspy and very calm sounding. He narrated the documentary March of the Penguins, which I've never seen. And last but not least, we have Cillian Murphy, who I thought his name was pronounced Cillian Murphy for the longest time until he was in Oppenheimer or something. Like when he was in Oppenheimer, I mean, he plays Dr. Jonathan Crane in this movie, but he wasn't like a household name. It was like I didn't know how the name Killian was pronounced, and so that's my bad. But Oppenheimer, I still have yet to see. I've got to watch that one. I might watch that sooner rather than later. He was also in a movie called Red Eye, and he does seem to play like either a bad guy or like a likable, creepy bad guy, or a good guy who has a less than good like background or something, or like is known for doing less than good things. Anywho, and he's also in the TV show Peaky Blinders, which I think is a Netflix series, and I've yet to watch, but I hear really good things. Like a guy I used to work with said he has watched that show through like several times because it's so good. So for casting notes, Cillian Murphy auditioned for the role of Bruce Wayne / Batman. His audition tapes with him wearing Val Kilmer's Batman suit from Batman Forever have since been leaked online, but he was ultimately given the role of Dr. Jonathan Crane. Like, he just didn't quite fit the bill for Batman. Other actors who were considered included Jake Gyllenhaal, who is always brought up in these conversations, and unfortunately I think Jake Gyllenhaal is getting to an age where maybe that's not as much of a likely thing that he would play Batman eventually. I would love to see him as Batman. I mean, I think his face might be too distinctive to pull it off, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they'll just get away with it. Henry Cavill was also considered. He went on to play Superman, and honestly, he would have been a good fit for this. I mean, if he hadn't played Superman and you just never really, like, if he'd never gotten big for playing Superman, if you would have seen him, you'd been like, oh yeah, he'd be a really good fit for Bruce Wayne. Like, that'd be amazing. But he does fit Superman really well. And also Heath Ledger was considered for the role of Bruce Wayne. And honestly, the fact that he went on to play the Joker in The Dark Knight, the sequel to this movie, is, I mean, it would have been a real bummer if we would have missed out on that performance for him to have gotten the lead role in this movie, but it is what it is. Viggo Mortensen was offered the role of Ducard, but he declined. Guy Pearce was also considered. I think Guy Pearce was considered too young at this point because Ducard is supposed to be like an older character. Kurt Russell and Chris Cooper were also considered for the role of Jim Gordon before it went to Gary Oldman. Honestly, I would have liked either of those guys in it. I mean, I love Kurt Russell. I think he's fucking great. I think he's not in enough shit. Reese Witherspoon and Sarah Michelle Gellar were also considered for the role of Rachel Dawes, which ultimately went to Katie Holmes. Honestly, would have liked either of those ones too. I mean, strangely enough, I think Reese Witherspoon is arguably the better actress of the two, even though I've always had a big crush on Sarah Michelle Gellar. I think Reese Witherspoon, especially if she would have gone with dark hair like Katie Holmes has, I think she would have pulled it off perfectly, but she might have been too big for such a minor role in this movie. And that might have been why she didn't take it. Even in 2005, when this came out, she would have been too big of a star to be relegated to such a small role. But she might have gone for it if she wanted to work with Christopher Nolan, but who knows? Anthony Hopkins was actually the first choice for the role of Alfred Pennyworth, but he ultimately turned it down. I'm not really sure why. I mean, it wasn't like he wasn't doing any movies at this point, so I don't know what the story was. But I mean, he would have been a great choice for Alfred too. He doesn't have the comedy chops of a guy like Michael Caine, in my opinion, but they're both very great actors, and I would have been happy with either of them. For the plot synopsis, after witnessing his parents' murder as a child and subsequently traveling the world to train his mind and body, a man returns to a decaying home city to dismantle its criminal underworld as a masked vigilante. Sorry that was so super long, but this plot synopsis had to be that way because it's very similar to the plot itself in that it's very dense. It has a lot of shit going on, but it's all relevant. So I'll just say that. For the tagline, "A legend is born." I don't really care for that. It's kind of generic, but it is what it is. All right, guys, let's just dive right into the plot of this motherfucking movie. So I am going to be taking on a different format for my plot discussion. I found that not only was it very monotonous to just walk through the plot and add little comments about it, but it was also taking me fucking forever to do every week's episode. It was I could barely get ahead unless I really forced myself to whip through it, and it was just not fun for me. And I love the idea of being able to watch these movies and just sit and watch them. And the way I was doing it before, I was having to fucking pause it every fucking 10 seconds to make some kind of note. Not my idea of a good time. So what I did was I'm going to try doing this. What I did is I took Google Gemini, I asked it to make me a somewhat detailed plot outline, and I basically went through and made sure there were discussion topics to be had while going through it, and I can actually just kind of elaborate and talk about it because that's really the fun of this. If I really wanted to talk through this plot in particular, I will say Batman Begins, like many Christopher Nolan movies, is not told in a linear manner, and I was finding it very difficult to explain what was going on in the plot and maintain the storytelling strategy the same way. So this plot outline, I should say, is more linear. It is more oh, this is when Bruce was young, this is when he was younger but not as young, and blah blah blah. So the film opens with a young Bruce Wayne playing with his friend Rachel Dawes. Bruce eventually falls into an abandoned well and he is swarmed by bats, developing this lifelong phobia of bats. They really do a huge amount of work hammering home the idea that Bruce totally fucking idolizes his father Thomas. Martha Wayne is his mother, and she is not a huge part of this movie. Honestly, until this movie came along, his parents were basically nameless, faceless people. They didn't really even talk much about what they were like or what they were all about. It was just that they were rich people and that they were, as I'm about to reveal, Bruce goes to an opera with his parents, and during the events of this opera, it starts to basically trigger PTSD flashbacks of the bats that Bruce saw in that dried up well, and he asks his parents to leave, and they eventually get murdered in an alley. But you find out before this that his parents are huge philanthropists. You just know that they're super rich and that his dad's a doctor, and you're well, doctors are notoriously rich or at least have good incomes usually, and especially the more responsibility or the better performing they are, depending on what hospital they work for or whatever, they really make a lot of money, but not like mansion with like huge properties and all this stuff kind of money. And you basically find out that they come from generational wealth and have been doing a lot to like clean up Gotham City because it's fucking dog shit in Gotham City. Like it's going to hell. There's a lot of crime, a lot of rundown areas and things like this. And so the irony is that when they're leaving this theater, this mugger named Joe Chill kills Thomas and Martha Wayne and leave 8-year-old Bruce to deal with this whole situation. So after that, they eventually catch Joe Chill, the police do, and he meets Jim Gordon, who is just like a regular beat cop, I think, at this point. And Bruce is raised by the loyal family butler, Alfred Pennyworth. And years later, college-age Bruce, who he's returning to Gotham from Princeton, where he's going to college, and he's coming back only seemingly temporarily at first for this parole hearing about Joe Chill. Like it's Joe Chill's parole hearing, and basically the story is that Joe Chill is ratting out this crime boss named Carmine Falcone in order to get a reduced sentence and potentially get out of jail sooner than he would have without doing this. But unfortunately, after this hearing where Bruce is very upset to see that the guy who killed his parents would be getting out of jail sooner than he was supposed to, basically you see that Bruce like brought a fucking snub-nosed revolver to this hearing with the intention of killing this guy after this hearing. Like he doesn't actually, like he's basically so frustrated during the hearing that he doesn't speak when he's given the opportunity to. And when Bruce goes outside, he's like gearing up with this revolver, but somebody who works for Falcone comes and kills Joe Chill in broad daylight in front of all these people. And basically it's just like, Falcone says hello or whatever. And Rachel is at this hearing because she's an assistant district attorney, and she gives him a ride to the hearing, and she's driving him back, and he's talking about it, and he like reveals what he was planning to do. And she basically like lays the fuck into him. Like she's like, your father would be fucking ashamed of you. Like you are such a piece of shit right now. Like this is the absolute opposite of what your father would want. And then she basically takes Bruce, like Bruce doesn't really want to believe Gotham City is as bad as it is, but she takes him to just basically prove it to him. She takes him to a restaurant where Falcone is, and Falcone basically just throws his weight around to Bruce, like basically telling Bruce initially that, he could have just sent a thank you letter or something. But Falcone makes it clear, like, because Bruce tries to get like tough with him, and Falcone's just like, man, I could fucking kill you. I mean, I'm sitting here in this restaurant with a judge and police officers and councilmen and all these fucking people, and I could just fucking blow your brains out right in front of them and not face any consequences for it. And basically he tells Bruce that like Bruce might think he doesn't have anything to lose, but basically Bruce fucking does. Like he's like, yeah, you kind of forget about like your friend in the DA's office, you forget about your old butler Alfred, all of these things that I could just take out, and you just don't realize how much privilege you have. And Falcone makes it clear that real power comes from being feared. And so basically after this whole interaction, Bruce leaves Gotham and he decides he's going to wander the world and immerse himself in the criminal underworld to just kind of understand the mind of predators and criminals and things like that. So basically Nolan just kind of uses this whole well that Bruce fell into when he was a kid as this like metaphor for his descent into what he becomes. Like, and it's really critical for like understanding the distinction between vengeance and justice, because this is what Rachel argues with Bruce about, is like, hey man, you want vengeance and it's not justice, it's vengeance. And Bruce kind of tries to argue with her that they're the same sometimes, and she's like, no, they're never the same, because justice is about harmony and making things right as a whole, and vengeance is about making you feel better individually and not giving a shit about what happens with anybody else. And there are like several instances throughout this movie where people make Bruce feel like complete shit and kind of remind him that like, oh, you're nothing like your father. And basically he kind of has to keep up this Playboy image to not give away that he is trying to follow in his father's footsteps, more or less. So Bruce ends up in this. It's not really well spelled out in the movie, but apparently it's a Bhutanese prison where he's approached by this man Henry Ducard, played by Liam Neeson. Ducard invites him to join the League of Shadows, which Bruce kind of mocks as like a gang of assassins, but they're actually like an elite group of vigilantes led by somebody named Ra's al Ghul. And by the way, Ra's al Ghul throughout the Batman comics and what's the other TV show and stuff, the animated series that I love so much. It's pronounced Ra's al Ghul, but there is some debate within the Batman fan community about what is the correct pronunciation, because although based on its spelling, it should be Ra's al Ghul, it's often pronounced Ra's al Ghul, especially in the animated series, but I'm going to say Ra's al Ghul because that's all they say in this movie, and it makes a lot more sense to say. So basically, Bruce has to take, this is what it's like Ducard comes to him in this prison and tells him, hey man, if you want to join this and get some direction in your life, why don't you take this rare blue flower to the top of this mountain where the League of Assassins, or League of Shadows, temple is. And Bruce does this, and basically Ducard trains Bruce to master his fear using theatricality and deception, and helps him excel in combat, and basically helps him overcome his fear of bats using that same blue flower as like a hallucinogen. Like he crushes it up into a pot and like roasts it over a fire, and it gives off this like aura, or what's the word I'm looking for? Like basically these fumes from this flower are hallucinogenic. So he breathes them in, and he's like forced to deal with his fear. And so once he passes all of these tests with training and all this stuff and helping to understand the ideals of the League of Shadows, Bruce is ordered to execute this criminal who is accused of murdering a farmer to steal his land. They want him to do this in order to prove his commitment to justice, but Bruce refuses because he says that this man should be tried, and of course Ducard is like, by whom? Corrupt bureaucrats? And basically Bruce is just like, no man, like you're not, I'm not an executioner, and this is just murder. Like what you're doing is not justified. You don't know for sure what this guy did or what the full story is. You should put him on trial, and they refuse to do it. And so basically, as a result of them forcing Bruce to either do this or, I guess, be exiled from the League of Shadows, Bruce incites like an attack. Like he basically just flips this very hot iron rod and causes the temple to blow up. He ends up saving Ducard in the process. But like the whole thing with them talking about him doing this to prove his commitment to justice is they like explain to him that like in order for him to lead these men, he has to do this. And he's like, well, where would you want me to fucking lead these guys? And they basically explain to him that their intent is to destroy Gotham City because they deem it too corrupt to be saved. And so, like I said, he burns down their temple and seemingly kills Ra's al Ghul, who is this Asian guy that is seemingly above Ducard. And like I said, though, he saves Ducard's life before returning to Gotham. And there's this whole thing. I mean, it's just like, it's extremism is what it is. I mean, the League of Shadows ideals are extremist ideals. They want to do all of this stuff, and it's very tough. Like they use a lot of cool metaphors and terminology. Like Ducard tells Bruce that he basically likens Gotham City to a forest that has grown too wild, and a purging fire is inevitable in these situations, and it needs to be cleansed of all of the bad things it's become. And basically Bruce just has this absolute ideal of like, oh hey, if I kill this dude, I am becoming as bad as the criminals. So that needs to be my one thing, is like I won't kill anybody because it would make me just as bad as anybody else. So Bruce goes back to Gotham. He finds out a lot of stuff. We get a ton of exposition throughout this movie because it's so much to take in. But basically Alfred explains to Bruce that he was declared dead because he was gone for 7 years. And Bruce takes an interest in Wayne Enterprises, which is going public, and it's being pretty well mismanaged by a man named Mr. Earl. And he's played by Rutger Hauer. And he has such a minor part in this movie, even though his name is well enough known. I didn't even mention him in the cast because it's such a stacked cast. Anyway, while Bruce is at Wayne Enterprises, he kind of feigns a lack of like real interest in causing any problems for them going public with the company. But he asks for a job, and he says he's interested in this department called Applied Sciences, which is headed by a man named Lucius Fox, who is like a former board member and was basically relegated to working in this department by himself because he was causing trouble for the board and they didn't really like him. So Fox actually provides Bruce with all of this experimental military tech, including like a prototype armored suit, this memory cloth cape, and this urban assault vehicle called the Tumbler, which is effectively what is the Batmobile. Like almost nobody knows or nobody doesn't know what the Batmobile is. But in this movie, the Batmobile is so different from every other iteration we had ever seen. And so this is like a whole big thing in this movie is it's supposed to be very much grounded in reality, especially with his technology, with Batman's gadgets and such. They are all much more realistic and a lot less ridiculous than they had been before. Even though, you could argue a lot of what Batman was using was not impractical. It might have just been taking a ridiculous form. But also in this process of acquiring all of this tech, Bruce, I should say, recalls his childhood fear of bats and adopts the persona of Batman. And he enlists the help of now Sergeant James Gordon, one of the city's few honest cops, because every fucking cop is on the take, corrupt, whatever you want to call them. And he also approaches Rachel Dawes and basically gives her a whole bunch of shit to help get the wheels moving with taking down these corrupt people in power. So Batman starts off, he has this really fucking cool scene, like probably one of my favorite scenes of all time is when you first see Bruce as Batman, and basically there is this shipment going out of these drugs that Carmine Falcone is shipping, and Batman comes and uses all of this theatricality and the darkness to take out all of these guys that are making sure the shipment goes out safely. And while Carmine Falcone is there, he leaves him tied to a searchlight and creates basically the first ever bat signal. And it's really fucking cool. Like, it's just, the whole scene is just so intense and well done. And honestly, that's just the way this movie made this more realistic and gave all of these explanations for how things came to be in the Batman world is how it distanced itself from the comic book world, right? It so much of the stuff in the original Batman quadrilogy was fantastical. It was so ridiculous and over the top and crazy that it was like, how could this ever possibly have been a thing? Like, how could you have made this or built this or whatever without anyone helping you? But it was just there and you just had to accept it. And that was basically what happened with this franchise, was like the first 4 Batman movies. Basically, I would say this is probably not the most popular opinion because there are a lot of conflicting opinions, especially with the Batman movies, but the first 4 progressively get more ridiculous and worse with each installment. I love Batman 1989. Probably my favorite movie of all time. I don't even know that anything else is close. And that one is basically a straightforward organized crime mob movie, but with these Batman elements, just making it more crazy and over the top. And then progressively you go to 1992 with Batman Returns, and basically that one was much more dark and adult than most comic book movies were, especially given that they were geared toward children. And there were very few comic book movies at this point, to be clear. And then because of that, Tim Burton, who had directed those first 2 movies, was ousted as director, and Joel Schumacher took over, who was a very talented director and known for turning small budgets into big hits. And so they thought oh, well, what if we gave him a movie where he actually had a budget and he could do more? And so he takes this over and he puts out Batman Forever, and it's largely successful, but it is much more cartoonish and child-friendly than the previous 2 movies had been. And honestly, Batman Forever was like the beginning of the end. It was like only the third movie, but it was just so much more ridiculous. But people really loved it because it had like Jim Carrey, who was at like the height of his power. And it was just not terrible enough to not be successful, basically. Like people liked it because of all of the elements of it, but it was as a whole, like looking back on it, it was just way too ridiculous and cartoonish. And then Batman and Robin came out in 1997, and there were so many ridiculous problems with that movie. It was basically a toy commercial, was all it was at that point, and it just kind of sucked. Like, it was not a great fucking choice. And basically, I'm explaining this because these were the events that forced the filmmakers to look for a way to reset this franchise. And so Christopher Nolan effectively invented the idea of a reboot. It was basically like, oh, we can reset this back to a certain time and just say, hey, we're starting over again. And then that became a big thing with a lot of these movies. So anyway, all of these overall plot choices, it's not just technology, it's a lot of these things. It's like they're very grounded in reality, and they ground this plot a lot more because the movies before it had gotten so ridiculous and crazy. So while the mob falls, a new threat emerges as Dr. Jonathan Crane, played by Cillian Murphy, who is a corrupt psychiatrist at Arkham Asylum, which is a mental hospital for the criminally insane in Gotham City. He has basically been using this concentrated fear gas to psychologically torture his victims. And basically, it's like you see this scene where he gasses Carmine Falcone, who's like threatening to turn him in. And basically, when Crane gasses him, it's basically like over for Falcone. Like, he can't even form a coherent thought. And this is like the last scene Falcone has in the movie because he just apparently goes nuts. And unless he gets an antidote, he's going to look like a crazy person forever. But we find out like he claims to Falcone before he gasses him that he's been working with this guy who is more powerful than Falcone himself. And clearly Falcone even like fears this guy. And the higher up bad guy is orchestrating this thing where Crane is dumping this fear toxin into the water supply. And everybody keeps saying, oh, well, you know, this is a compound that must be absorbed through the lungs, so nobody can really understand why on earth they would be putting it into the water supply, because if you have to breathe it in, why would this make any sense? So while Batman is investigating what is going on with all of this stuff, Crane finds him and gasses Batman, and Batman has to call Alfred and have him take him home. Alfred contacts Lucius Fox, who develops an antidote for the fear toxin. There is this moment in this scene where basically Bruce wakes up after like a couple of days of feeling the effects of this weaponized toxin, and the moment where Alfred reveals to him that he contacted Fox to have him develop an antidote, there is this moment where Lucius Fox says, Alfred, always a pleasure. And Alfred turns to him and goes, Lucius. And it's just the funniest fucking scene to me because it feels so unnatural. It doesn't make any kind of sense to me, but it's just really hilarious seeming. So basically, after all this happens, at Bruce's 30th birthday party, Henry Ducard reappears, and he reveals that he is the real Ra's al Ghul, who was the man that Bruce saw die, and that was just a decoy, apparently, is what we're to believe. It was the Asian guy that was supposed to be Ra's al Ghul. Anyway, and I can't remember what that fucking actor's name is. But, okay, so there's yet another weird scene, or weird moment, I should say, in this scene where Ducard reveals himself and shares that he's actually Ra's al Ghul and all this stuff. So it's framed as like this random woman is introducing Bruce to this man at the party, and she's like, am I saying this right? Is it Ra's al Ghul? And Bruce turns around and looks up, and it's just some random Asian guy. And Bruce says in front of this woman, you're not Ra's al Ghul. I watched him die. And I'm like, why are you saying this in front of everybody? Like, this is completely insane to me. And we also find out that the League of Shadows has stolen this powerful Wayne Enterprises microwave emitter from Wayne Enterprises, like, shipments. And basically, this uses what is it? Focused microwaves to vaporize an enemy's water supply. And they realize that, oh, well, if they were using this microwave emitter, they could vaporize the water that the fear toxin has been getting dumped into and make it breathable, like make it so that they could put the toxin into the air and cause the city to just tear itself apart in just this massive panic. So it's really weird. I mean, I remember when I first saw this movie because I was really excited when they were making this movie. And this whole Scarecrow character, it was like, I don't remember at what point it clicked for me. I think the name Jonathan Crane made sense, but it was like until they started calling him Scarecrow, I was like, oh my God, they really did it. Like, because the talk was after Batman and Robin was made, if it had been successful, they were going to make this movie called Batman Unchained. I've also heard it called Batman Triumphant. But anyway, it was supposed to have like Harley Quinn in it, and it was supposed to have the Scarecrow played by Jeff Goldblum. And I don't remember where it all clicked, but basically he was supposed to be the Scarecrow. So I was like, oh shit, they really did do the Scarecrow in this. And it was just really wild to think about. But basically we get some really cool scenes where there's this moment throughout this sequence before Bruce's birthday party where Dr. Crane drugs Rachel Dawes because she's basically onto him. Like she's figuring out what he's doing and he gasses her with like a concentrated dose. So Bruce has to take her in the Batmobile. And honestly, probably my favorite sequence of the whole movie is Bruce has this like thing making noise in the bottom of his boot. This, I should say it's Batman. It's not really Bruce. And he's like working with Gordon at Arkham Asylum to try and rescue Rachel, and he uses this noisemaker thing to like draw a swarm, like a huge swarm of bats. And it's a really cool moment, and you kind of see how much the cops like fear Batman during this moment, and it's really fucking awesome. I really love it. And they use this to really demonstrate how crazy the Batmobile is, and you see all of its abilities, and it makes sense. It's like they keep calling it like a bridging vehicle. It's like they can fire cables across a river, and the tumbler can jump across. And I don't really understand. Like they basically explained that like the reason it failed is because they couldn't make it bridge, but it's not clear enough what that would look like. Like two of those, they'd like explain that two tumblers would go across towing cables or something and make a bridge. So anyway, Ra's al Ghul sets fire to Wayne Manor after the birthday party and leaves Bruce to die, but Alfred actually rescues him. And so the League takes this microwave emitter, they load it onto this monorail, and so the big thing with the monorail is like when Bruce is riding around on this monorail with his parents, basically Thomas Wayne was the person who made this monorail happen. He worked with Lucius Fox to design it, and he wanted to basically make an affordable transportation choice like public transit for people in Gotham City who would fallen on hard times. And so basically it's like this huge connective thing where it's like, oh, like they're using this monorail that follows the water lines. They're going to load the microwave emitter and turn it on this monorail and ride with it. And basically these water mains are going to burst as they are vaporized, or the water inside them are vaporized. So they're releasing the toxin into the slums of Gotham, which is called the Narrows, and the city starts to descend into madness, and they raise the bridges so that people can't get across. And but the plan is that they're going to use this monorail, and eventually it's going to destroy all of them. Like it's going to hit this hub at beneath Wayne Tower and cause all of them to have a chain reaction and explode. And basically we get a bunch of cool sequences. I really kind of have to go into some of these things, but I'm going to do it at the very end. So basically Batman has to confront Ra's al Ghul on this moving train, and Gordon has to use the tumbler to destroy the monorail tracks before they can reach Wayne Tower. And Batman eventually gains the upper hand, and he tells Ra's al Ghul that he's not going to kill him, but he doesn't have to save him. And so Batman uses his cape to glide to safety as the train crashes and kills Ra's al Ghul and basically destroying the emitter at the same time. This moment, though, I have to, before I get into the other stuff, because there's some stuff I want to make sure I talk about, this moment where he says, I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you. It's like, yeah, I mean, you're basically killing him though, right? Like that's what you're doing. You're not killing him. You're just doing it in a more indirect way and you are acting like that's making you more free of guilt or something, but in reality, it's like it's the same way as anything. It's like I set the wheels in motion. Like Batman literally stabs the controls of the train so it can't stop. And then I think it's Batman that does that anyway. And then causes this, like he escapes. And it's like, I don't know that Ra's al Ghul actually had an escape plan either, but it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? I mean, if I sabotage the brake lines on a vehicle of one of my enemies and they get in the vehicle and the brakes fail and they fucking die, I am at fault for their death. Like that's how that works. So the ending of this movie is there's parts I love about it and parts I'm not a huge fan of. So in the aftermath, Bruce is a hero, though he must maintain his playboy facade to protect his identity and basically throw people off the trail. He ends up firing Mr. Earl and reveals that he was doing all the investing in the company when they went public, and so he still effectively owns it, and he makes Lucius Fox the CEO of Wayne Enterprises. Rachel so this is the part I do not care for. So Rachel comes and sees Bruce and his mansion's all fucking burnt down, like Wayne Manor is in rubble. And she comes and talks to him and she's like apologetic about what she had said to him when he was basically revealing to her that he intended to kill Joe Chill. And she's like apologizing and he's like, no, you said things that needed to be said, truthful things. Although they were hurtful, they needed to be told to me. And she basically reveals to him that because of his mask as like Bruce Wayne, as this playboy facade thing, she says that they like can't be together as long as Gotham needs Batman. And so obviously it's Rachel Dawes' character in this movie is so unlikable. It's unbelievable. Like she does this. It's like this holier than thou moment where she's like, oh, hey, you know, when I said that we could like be together eventually, well, guess what? No fucking way, bro. You're Batman and you're pretending to be somebody you're not all the time. And that's not great for me. But the film actually ends with Batman meeting Lieutenant James Gordon on a rooftop. And Gordon shows him this new bat signal and warns him about a new criminal with a quote unquote taste for the theatrical like him. And he leaves behind a Joker playing card. So it's like a very heavy handed insinuation that the villain of the next movie will be the Joker. Batman says that he promises to look into it. But my favorite part of this whole moment is Batman is going to leave. He's going to jump off this rooftop after talking about the Joker with Gordon. And Gordon stops him and says, you know, I never thanked you. And Batman turns around in a very wonky way because he can't turn his head with the mask that he's got on, like the cape and cowl don't allow for his neck to move. So he turns around after Gordon says, you know, I never thanked you. And Batman says, and you'll never have to. And luckily his voice is not as insane as it got to be in the second and third movies, because I actually kind of like what he did with the movie or with the voice in this movie. But a couple of things I really wanted to touch on were there is a moment where Bruce is beefing up his Playboy image and he goes to this hotel and he has these girls with him and they want to like swim in the pool that's really just there for decoration. It's not for people to swim in. And Bruce basically just arrogantly puts a check in this maitre d's pocket and tells him that he's buying the hotel and he's changing the rules about the swimming area. And Rachel sees him as he's leaving this hotel and he's like all wet from swimming. And it's basically like looking like he's turned into this complete piece of shit in her mind. And he tries to tell her, like, Rachel, this really isn't me. This isn't really who I am. I'm not this guy. I know what it looks like. And she says this line to him of like, it's not who you are underneath. It's what you do that defines you. And it obviously, like, you can tell it breaks his fucking heart because it's like, oh, this woman that I have known and have probably loved my entire life really thinks I'm totally a piece of shit. And it doesn't even really matter what I have to say about it because clearly I look like a piece of shit and what I'm doing is not right. And so when she sees him later in the movie, like she meets him when he's giving her evidence to basically use as leverage against the mob and bring all of these corrupt officials down. She sees him there, and then later she sees him when Ra's al Ghul is using the microwave emitter to release the fear toxin on the city. And he's about to, like, Batman is about to jump off a rooftop after saving Rachel. And she's like, wait, you could die, at least tell me your name. And he stops and turns back to her and he says, it's not who I am underneath. It's what I do that defines me. And so she obviously knows it's him because obviously, like, she has to know that she literally said that to him a few days before. And so there's a lot of these really cool moments. It's such a well constructed story. It's one of those ones where it's really satisfying because it feels like every single scene and even line of dialogue to some degree is integral and necessary to the plot. Like, there's nothing that's just in there that doesn't advance the plot in any way or help you understand anything better. And it does help that it's like, I do know this character really well, so it's like piecing it together is a little more interesting because you already kind of have a sense of what it might be. But that is how this movie ends, is Batman jumps off this rooftop after saying that Gordon will never have to thank him for what he's done because he's doing it for the reasons he is. And so we roll credits, and trivia for this movie: although Christian Bale performed many of his own stunts in this movie, he wasn't allowed anywhere near the Batmobile tumbler. Christian Bale's active dislike of his uncomfortable Batman outfit helped his performance, as he was perpetually in a foul mood while wearing it. And Christian Bale, notoriously not always the most even-keeled, cool-tempered person, writer and director Sir Christopher Nolan decided that there would be no second unit. And so for the whole 129 shooting days, Nolan oversaw every shot of the movie personally. Because what they do in a lot of movies is they'll have a second unit production team that they'll shoot less important moments from the movie, B-roll type stuff, or things that don't require a lot of good direction and just to get it done in the time frame that they have. Writer and director Sir Christopher Nolan is reputed to have been so fascinated with Cillian Murphy's bright blue eyes that he kept trying to find reasons and ways to have his character, Dr. Jonathan Crane, remove his glasses. Wild. I mean, they are super blue. While shooting on the streets of Chicago, a person accidentally crashed into the Batmobile, and the driver was apparently drunk and said he hit the car in a state of panic, believing the Dark Knight's vehicle to be an invading alien spacecraft. Okay, that's wild. When Christian Bale and Liam Neeson were fighting on the frozen lake, they could hear the ice cracking beneath their feet. The next day, the lake had completely melted. Much of Batman's gear and apparel, including his cape and suit, is based on real-life military technology. In an interview with Moviefone, Christian Bale said that he became interested in playing Batman after a friend of his loaned him the graphic novel Arkham Asylum by Grant Morrison and Dave McKean in 2000. After he read it, he told his agent that if anyone was ever making another Batman movie, that he wanted in. Christian Bale decided early on in the audition process that he didn't want to play Batman straight, but to play him as a rage-filled monster, figuring that it might polarize writer and director Christopher Nolan. To his delight, Nolan was thrilled with his off-kilter interpretation of the character. Christian Bale lost his voice 3 times during filming after altering his voice while playing Batman. Contrary to the previous Batman movies, in which the Batcave was realized as a combination of a live set and matte paintings done either by hand or computer, no visual effects were used in this movie to show the Batcave. The entire Batcave is instead a massive full-scale set. Due to his part in The Machinist from 2004, Christian Bale was vastly underweight, about 120 pounds on his 6-foot frame, when he was under consideration for the part. After being cast, he was told to become as big as he could be by Sir Christopher Nolan. Bale underwent a 6-month dietary and exercise regimen and ended up weighing about 220 pounds, which was about 40 pounds above his normal weight, and it was decided that Bale had become too large. Friends of His on this movie's crew dubbed him Fat Man, and he quickly shed about 20 pounds to have a leaner, more muscular frame. Bale described the experience as an unbearable physical ordeal. The language used by Ken Watanabe, that's what the guy's name is that plays Ra's al Ghul. I apologize for just calling him the Asian guy, but he is Asian, to be fair. The language is neither Japanese nor Tibetan, nor in fact any known language at all. It's supposedly some gibberish he says he made up himself for the role, though the subtitles listed as Urdu. Don't know what that, I've never heard that language in my life. An unforeseen problem with the Ninja Training Academy was that Liam Neeson towered over the rest of the men. This was swiftly solved by putting most of the ninjas on wooden blocks to make up for the height difference. Sir Gary Oldman agreed to play Jim Gordon without even reading the script. He was the last actor cast, and he learned his lines on the flight to his first location. For IMDb nuggets, whilst explaining his own backstory, Liam Neeson tells Bruce his wife had been taken, a word eventually synonymous with Neeson's future career with the release of the movie Taken 3 years later. Not really that interesting, not even really trivia at all. It's just a stupid factoid that he happened to say a very common word in a movie 3 years before he made a movie that was called that same thing. All right, on to info and ratings. Opening weekend, 48.7 million. Worldwide gross, 375.6 million. IMDb rating, 8.2. Letterboxd rating, 3.8. Rotten Tomato critic score, 85%. Rotten Tomato critic score, 85%. Rotten Tomato audience score, 94%. Personal rating, 5 out of 5 stars. Praise for this movie. I honestly love what they did with this movie. I will say I am kind of glad that they made it like this finite trilogy when they did these movies, because as much as I enjoyed it, I do like the comic booky versions of these movies as well. I think that the fact that this cast is so spectacular, I didn't mention it during trivia. I thought it was in there, but basically Christopher Nolan wanted to give this movie more credibility by bringing in a lot of big names to the cast, and basically they all deliver on it. I love the writing of this movie. I love the way they make everything work together to like fit the narrative and make it so everything kind of like has a cause and effect nature to it. For criticism, I would just say the fact that this movie wasn't more successful than it was, it just bums me out. Like, I don't know if they just didn't market it well enough, but I mean, it was called Batman Begins, so it had Batman in the title. And I mean, this movie made under 400 million worldwide as a superhero movie, and it is shocking that it made as little as it did compared to most superhero movies. And they still were willing to do a sequel, and the sequel, The Dark Knight, made over $1 billion worldwide. So it was obviously worth it. Very enjoyable. Really fucking love this movie. I go back to it very frequently. It's one of my all-time favorites. As a huge Batman fan, I can't get enough of it. All right, everyone. Thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day. Bye now.
I'm here to welcome you